today. The family has been notified. One of the individuals, Andre Thompson, age 23, and Bryson Chaplin, age 21. We've had several demonstrations today. They have been peaceful, with no issues. I appreciate that. We appreciate the patience of the community as we work through this process, and as we try to provide as much information as we can to you. We want to let the public know that we have set up a web page with a link to the city's home page that has a lot of information available. So I encourage you all to access that and find out more about what's going on and all the details that we can provide regarding the status of the investigation from our perspective. At our last press conference, there was a little bit of confusion, I think, about who's doing what in the investigation, who has what particular role in the investigation, and who's actually in charge of leading this entire investigation from the time this call went out and started safely to the events that unfolded on a particular point. So what I'd like to do is invite Chief Deputy Brad Watkins of the Thurston County Sheriff's Office, who's in charge of the detectives investigating this case, and will provide information to you about the critical incident response team and their role in this, as well as Prosecutor John Thunheim, who can talk a little bit about what the role of the prosecutor's office is and really how this investigation will unfold. So Brennan, if you could please come up.
Good afternoon. The Thurston County Critical Incident Investigative Team was requested by the Olympia Police Department to respond to this incident. This particular team is comprised of 5 agencies within Thurston County. It's the Thurston County Sheriff's Office, the Olympia Police Department, the Lacey Police Department, the Tumwater Police Department, and the Washington State Patrol. Because the Olympia Police Department is the agency that had the officer involved in this incident, they do not have an active role in this investigation at all. We have a total right now of 16 investigators that are involved in this case. They are 6 from the Sheriff's Office, 5 from the City of Lacey, 3 from the Washington State Patrol, and 2 from the Tumwater Police Department. The crime scene itself has been cleared at this time. There's been a large amount of evidence gathered there to include photographic evidence, physical evidence. At this point, we have interviewed in excess of 20 people. We have talked with one of the suspects in this case. It is an unfolding case. They're very fluid. The expectation is, and what this team's job is to do, is to look at this entire incident strictly on the criminal side of things. We're not involved in internal Olympia Police Department policies, procedures, internal investigations. That's not what we're due. So from the start of this incident, which in this particular case starts at the West Olympia Safely store, up until the time of the shooting, that is what we are investigating. And our job is to do a thorough, complete investigation using all of the techniques and tools we have available to us. And then we put together a complete package of the entire case, and we refer that to the prosecutor's office. And then the prosecutor's job, of course, is to make any charging decisions based on that investigation. Any questions about that?
Can you tell us which of the 2 you were able to speak with?
We talked to the older brother, is the one that we spoke with.
Would you?
Andre Thompson.
And what's the conditions, the updated conditions for both of them?
The Andre Thompson is listed in serious but stable condition at Tacoma General at the last we checked, which was as of about an hour and a half ago. And his younger brother is at St. Peter's Hospital, listed in critical condition. According to the information provided by the healthcare providers at this time, they are both expected to survive their wounds.
You said you interviewed 20 people. Can you give us a breakdown of what those 20 people, what their involvement is in the case, like witnesses or?
I can't give you the specifics, like I don't really have the specifics, but I know there was a couple of witnesses from the Safeway store. I know there were some surrounding residents that heard part of the commotion that were interviewed. There were some family members that were interviewed. We interviewed several officers that responded after the fact that arrived on the scene. And I believe we also interviewed some fire EMS personnel.
Were there any videos, are there any on lapel cameras or any recordings?
There was no body-worn cameras or vehicle-mounted cameras on the Olympia officer involved. We do have video from the Safeway store where this, the initial incident occurred.
Can you share what Mr. Thompson shared with you about what happened? What is he saying happened to him and his brother?
I don't have the specifics to that statement. I just realized, I know that we interviewed him.
You had a number of investigators there now and been able to gather some evidence. Can you give us a better rundown of as I understand it, there were two separate incidents where one individual was shot and then there was some sort of time lapse and the other individual was shot. Can you give us a better rundown of what happened there? And you probably recovered the shell casings. Can you give us an idea of how many rounds were fired?
I don't have the exact number at this point in time. There were several recovered. As far as the timeline, I haven't looked specifically at the timeline from when the officer initially stated shots had been fired up until the point where he stated, basically both subjects were down and he was waiting for his backup. So I don't know what that time frame is. It's not a long time frame, but I don't know the specifics on that.
So do you know how many shots were fired?
I do not.
Can you characterize what's being called the assault skateboard? Did both have skateboards, one have a skateboard, and how were they used to assault Officer Dunn?
I can't answer the question as to how they were used because I don't have that information. I can verify that there were two skateboards that were recovered as evidence.
Do you have any information about, we heard earlier about an assault near the vehicle, near the officer's car. That's where the first shot apparently happened. Then he chases them into the woods and then there's another confrontation. Yes, there's another confrontation. Is there any information about what the officer perceived as the threat in that second confrontation that led him to open fire again? And did he shoot both brothers at that point or the second one, having wounded the first one previously?
I actually don't have an answer to that question at this point in time.
If I understand correctly, both of them were unarmed, did not have weapons. They had the skateboards. Officers have an array of tools in their bags, including tasers and others. Did the officer have a chance to use a taser or some other less detrimental force?
I don't have an answer to that question, sir.
Chief, can you answer if he had a taser?
I do believe he had a
And did he deploy it?
Not that I'm aware of, but I don't know the answer.
Was the officer injured at all? Did he suffer any kind of bruises, lacerations? Was anybody else injured other than the two individuals who were shot? I mean, injured as in needing treatment?
Not to my knowledge.
For all the questions you don't have answers to or details to, when will those be available?
These investigations, they all vary in time, how long it takes to put together the entire packet. A vast majority of the investigation can be done within the first week or so, but then we're waiting for reports from outside entities. An example would be like the Washington State Crime Lab. There are certain things that we will have to send off to them. They will have to do their analysis and then get it back to us. So in order to give a complete package to the prosecutor's office, we have to try to get as much of that information back as possible. I don't really want to throw out any kind of a timeline. It would not be unusual for this to take 3 to 6 weeks. That would not be unusual. But keep in mind, the vast majority of the investigation could be complete in another week or so. It's just some of those, important but outstanding reports is what's going to be the delay.
Thank you.
Would you be willing to make available to us that Safeway video, surveillance video?
I would have to check with our lead investigator on that to make that determination.
Was the skateboard broken in the assault? Are the two skateboards you have in full, perfect condition now?
I have not seen them, but I have not been advised that they were broken or damaged, but I have not personally seen them.
How do you
Did it occur
determine?
at a skate park, essentially?
I'm sorry, what?
Did the shooting happen right at a skate park?
No, it did not.
The Safeway, a little forest, and the skate park is
If you're
right-
familiar with West Olympia, there's the skate park that's behind Safeway.
Right.
And Safeway, this incident occurred further down Cooper Point as you're headed towards the end of Cooper Point.
by what?
14th and Cooper Point,
Going north.
going north.
The chief of police was talking today about the policy, you know, if an officer has a reasonable fear for his safety, he can use deadly force regardless of what type of weapon a suspect has. How do you guys in your investigation determine whether that officer did have a reasonable fear for his safety? Is there any other tools besides his statement alone that would determine that?
I think it would be premature to answer that question because, again, we have not taken a formal statement from the officer, which is normal protocol. It's usually a 48 to 72-hour period. We have scheduled to interview him on Tuesday, and I think at that time we'll get a better understanding of what his observations were and why he acted and reacted the way that he did.
But more
So it's my
generally
understanding
speaking,
that
how
the
would you
officer's not-
determine if an officer, in another case, in any, generally speaking, how can you determine if an officer was truly fearful for their safety?
It would have to go a lot to their mindset, and that's what we get when we interview them, is we find out what they're thinking, what are they seeing, what threats are they perceiving, because I may perceive something one way and somebody else will perceive it a completely different way. So until we have that interview, I mean, obviously we have physical evidence of that we're going to evaluate, and again, we put the package together, and then we will pass that off to the prosecutor's office for their ultimate finding.
Did I understand you to say that the interview with the officer won't be occurring until, did I hear you say Tuesday?
I believe Tuesday is when we have.
And we're talking Tuesday of next week?
Yes, sir.
That seems to me you would want to talk to the officer, right after the incident to get the information while it's fresh
Come on.
in his mind. So talk to us about that, Chief.
Okay, we don't conduct interviews with officers involved right after a critical incident because there has been a great deal of study that shows within the first 48, 72 hours, you are remembering things more clearly as a little bit more time passes. Not a lot of time, but a little bit more time because you have adrenaline going. You may say you did this when actually evidence would show that you didn't do that. We would offer that same opportunity to witnesses, victims. It's no different with the officer.
Well, and Sheriff, I understand that logic. It makes sense. It's rational. On the other hand, individuals in the public will say this, and that is, wow, sounds like to me the officer's been given time to figure out his story of what he's going to say and how he's going to say it. And I'm not saying that's the case, and I am no way accusing that officer of that. But that is a perception.
And I understand that can be the perception.
You're familiar with the case in Cleveland? Cop stood on the hood of a car, pumped 15 shots out of his revolver into the windshield, and killed 2 innocent, unarmed people, said he never feared more for his life.
I'm not familiar with
Do
these.
you have an idea of the distance between the officer and the 2 young men at the time of the shooting?
I do not.
Okay.
Mr. Trudeheim, can you explain the process once the investigation is complete? How do we determine if this was justified?
Yes, thank you. My name is John Toon. I'm the prosecuting attorney here in Thurston County, and I appreciate the question. I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of my office in the investigation, and then as the matter progresses forward. This morning, my office was advised about the incident and the fact that the critical incident team have been called out and deployed. I have a deputy prosecutor that is assigned to be a liaison to that team, who was consulted and advised briefly about what was going on with the incident. I will tell you right now that I won't be able to answer any questions regarding the facts of the incident because I have basically no more information, factual information at this point than you've heard so far. But we are We do make ourselves available through this liaison to answer questions for investigating